Okay, we're pretty much at 6 o'clock. So I'll just check that everyone online, you can see me okay and hear me okay. And maybe get a little wave from someone or a thumbs up. Hang on, I'll just walk around here. Here we go. Now I'm on. Oh, thank you. So welcome. I think everyone here's grabbed a drink, grabbed some pizza. Tonight, we're going to take a bit of a spotlight onto dRofus dynamic forms, also known as the dRofus dynamic, I like to say GUI. Some people say GUI. I don't know, dRofus, what do you say? GUI? 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 GUI. And then we've got Chris Murray from dRofus is going to look at what's new in the stable, what's new in the beta. And then Jasper is going to talk about our upcoming and also ongoing demonar series. And then we'll have a few questions. And if you do have questions, we have another mic, so we'll hand that around. And that way people online can hear what's going on. So firstly, BVN acknowledges the First Nations of the countries on which we work. We pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, their customs, laws, and creation spirits. And just on the First Nations at the moment, you obviously know there's a bit of a referendum coming up about that. And I don't know, speaking as a gay man who up until recently was illegally married, and you know, having that kind of national conversation about you and about other people talking about one of your characteristics, you know, it was really troubling and really hard. So I just wanted to say to have, you know, some real compassion during this debate. And if you've got any doubts about it, vote yes. So the what, where, and how of dynamic and what is not dynamic. So true, room data panel, item occurrence panel, function data panel. These are the dynamic areas of the dRofus client and interface. The things that are not dynamic are these, the properties, template properties, item properties. So where do you find it? It's under that little settings cog down in the corner. If you're not an administrative user, you probably won't have access to this. So I'm not going to go like too high level on all of this. I want this to, you know, it'll relate to you as a user if you're not an admin user as well. So don't freak out. So the dynamic GUI, there they are, room data panel, project function data panel, item occurrence window. Those other ones there under the X, they're dynamic as well, but I'm not going to talk about those today. We don't really use them much as architects. And I think the TIDA, we don't even use it in Australia, period. So once you click that little room data panel, you get this, and this is the dynamic GUI editor. And the thing to know about these is you've got the panel, is that bit there, description is the panel. Oh, come back, little tab. There we go. Sorry, the panel room data. The tab is description. And then you've got the groups, which are the briefing description. And it's kind of confusing because you've got a group and a tab named the same thing there. And then you've got your elements. We've got, here we go. And we've got fields. So that's where you write this stuff in the back part of dRofus. But how does it look in the client? So the panel, the room data panel, can be accessed either through here, but most people will double click on a room to open that panel. And then once you're in the panel, it looks like this. You've got your the room data up there. I'm not sure why that's going blank occasionally, but the panel is there. You've got your tabs, you've got your groups. Some of those groups will have a label, obviously, in blue. And then your elements sit here. And then your fields. Some of those labels of the fields are actually hidden. And how does it look in Excel? When it spits out, you've got the same thing. Your tab is red up there. So when you see those Excel imports, you can kind of tell where it's come from in dRofus by recognizing these aspects. Where it can get kind of hard to read is this. We've got a group header for all of these, but then in the next kind of level down, some of them don't have labels entered. So first of all, there I've got an element with a label, but the element label in the column H there is either hidden or has never been entered. Now with your field type, the labels are either hidden or they're just not entered. But what's kind of interesting in this one is that when an element only has a single field in it, you don't get a little prompting header in brackets where it might say yes, no, or text. And what that actually kind of looks like when you do put a label on it is you won't get the little yes, no, and text. So, you know, it's kind of a choice of your administrator about how many of those labels get entered or not. And then what about PDF RDS? The same things. You get your tab, your groups, your elements, your fields. And let's not forget the dRofus web. Same thing. You know, you've got your tab, your group, your elements, and your fields. So whenever you're kind of building or looking at this GUI, you've kind of got to think, well, how is it going to spit out in all the different forms of dRofus? And that can take a little bit of experimentation. So with the item data, it's kind of the same thing. You know, it's the GUI editor looks the same. The panel kind of looks the same. Except when we get to got same GUI options and then the same kind of data panel. But with the function data panel, it looks the same in the editor. It's got the panel, you've got the tab, group, elements, and a recalcitrant clicker, fields. But in the actual viewing panel, there is no panel because it actually appears in the properties panel of the function. So that's your tab down there rather than being an actual separate page. And then again, your elements. Note here that the group label actually can't be shown. Even if you wanted to add a group label in this section, it doesn't seem to be possible. And then the fields there. And then if you've not actually looked at the function data panel before, the way to show it is to actually select the function within the navigation pane, and then that will reveal the function properties in the properties panel. If you then switch and click on a room, that same panel will reveal the properties of the room instead. And then the item occurrence window is kind of similar to the function. Same dynamic GUI editor, the panel, the tabs, the groups, the elements, and the field. But again, there's no panel. It appears in the item occurrence properties. Down there, we've got a tab, we've got a field. And note that, again, the group label actually can't be shown, even if you want it to be. But the element and the field label, they can actually be hidden. And this is what it kind of looks like when if you did reveal the label element followed by the field. And then also, if you're not familiar with the occurrence data panel, the way to reveal it, you've got to select an occurrence within the dRofus occurrence window. And then that will reveal the properties. If you've clicked just on the item itself, that properties panel is going to reveal the properties of the item. See, wrong way. But wait, there is a lot more to the editor, and this is kind of where it can get a bit hairy. Come back screen. So many of the field types that are available for us to create are pretty self-explanatory, and you can pretty much align them to the type of data that you're wanting to capture. Actually, just jump back. There we go. So button, checkbox field, fixed text, multi-line edit, numeric field, single line edit. Of those, I'd say I'll probably use single line edit, multi-line edit, and my good old favorite radio buttons combo box. That's probably the main thing people use. You don't really need to get too clever here. Even using a numeric field, you can still just use a single line edit. So it will receive text and a numeric. With the label, this is where you'd actually enter the field label if you wanted one. And then below it, it gives you the option to actually show that label in front of the field, behind it, or to not show it at all. So entering those labels can kind of, you don't really maybe want to see it when you're direct into dRofus, but they can be quite useful in the Excel export by having those labels present. And you can always just not show them if you feel like it's kind of cluttering up the way you look at it in the dRofus interface. Then help text. I don't think I've ever seen anyone use this, but apparently if you put something in here that tells you how to use the information, when you hover over it in the dRofus software, if you hover over that attribute, a little yellow box will pop up with the help text. But it won't come out in the Excel in the header to give you that same help. It's possible to set data to be read-only. So once you've kind of brought all this information in and you might want to lock it off so no one can touch it or copy it or hurt it, you can mark that field to read-only. And this field can be toggled. So if you did have something you wanted to bring in later, you could jump into the editor, make it write again, and then put it back to read-only. This guy. It is possible to set your element field to be activated by another field first. And I don't know if you cast your mind back to that Excel, there was a yes, no checkbox. And if you're familiar with the OzHFG, you would have seen that you kind of tick a box and then it activates the ability to write in the next field next to it. Personally, it's just extra stuff to do. I don't know that people are accidentally typing stuff into these fields anyway. But that's what it does. You can actually lock a field until someone's ticked it, and then they can only write into it after that. Or, yeah, that's the kind of basics of it. Now, most fields here, they have default sizes. So if you just leave it 0, kind of dRofus will just do kind of what it wants. And it's usually pretty good. And most of the fields have a default size, so you don't really have to worry about it. But if you are going to experiment with this, I wouldn't rely on the refresh view that you see in this window. It's not really truly reflective of what you're going to see out in the actual panel that we've been looking at. It'll give you kind of a bit of an idea, but you should always go and check it in situ. The OA and O. This actually sets how the field's going to behave when you resize the window. There's actually a heap of options under this, about whether you can tell it to go top, bottom, right, left, all sorts of things. But if you leave it set to none, it's the default. Whenever you make one of these, it'll be set to OA none. And I don't know, it could be something worth experimenting with, but I tend to just let dRofus do what it wants to by default. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And then the number, that's actually the tab number, the group number, the element number, and the field number kind of all put together. And I guess it's kind of what makes dynamic GUI a bit different from things like properties, in that the identifier is that number. So you can actually have kind of duplicate names. You could have hours of operation, hours of operation, hours of operation over and over again. And dRofus will let you do that because it's using that number to identify it. So everything in the description tab here begins with a 10, and then the group will be 15. And that might seem a bit like, well, how is that the first one is 10, like it's the first one in the list? But things happen in this dynamic GUI, and this particular standard project has evolved over time. And when you start from scratch, the very first field that you create, the very first tab, will be numbered 1. And then, you make 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then you start changing them around in order, because you can actually move description down to be where description 2 is, and you can shuffle things around, but they still keep the number that they were made with. So number 1 might not even exist anymore. It's being deleted. And I don't think dRofus will recreate the same number, but I don't know. You probably really only want to worry about those numbers if you're doing custom reporting, perhaps. It's but that's what it is. But one last thing, once you've made dynamic GUI, you'll go to where you want to look at it and it won't be there. And you'll be like, what the hell have I done? And all of those tabs and fields and elements that you've created, they actually need to be added to what's called a view filter in dRofus. And this is one of those things that can get people every time, gets me every time. I create one, I go to look at it, it's not there. I'm like, that's right, view filter. So all of the panels essentially have one of these view filters where instead of deleting dynamic GUI that you've created, you can just remove it from the views that people are using, so it can stay in the database and maybe be used for future purposes, save you having to recreate them. So once it's created, so everything on the left there wouldn't be seen in the actual panel, but everything on the right would be visible. And you can set up multiple views that would be suited to different stages of a project or suited to different users. Room data has its own view filter. The item type and occurrence view filter, though, is a shared one. They put them together. And then just to be slightly difficult, the function data view filter is actually in the editor, in this little spot here, where once you've created it, you select your tab and you can tell it the function location. So whether you want to be able to see that function information at the building level, at the department level, or at the sub-department level, or at all of them. And honestly, this is the last thing. I'm sure you've had enough of this. Once you've gone through a lot of trouble on a project to create some personalized dynamic GUI, it's possible within the dRofus administrator to copy that to another project. And it's also possible to copy it to other servers as well. So to do that is this little copy data button. And then once you go in there, it gives you this kind of option to choose what you want to copy. And I would typically go partially copy RDS GUI or item, partially the delete and copy item GUI actually means the same as partially copy item GUI. It doesn't mean it's going to delete it all and then put something new in. The only thing you've got to be aware of there is those numbers we were looking at. If the numbers in the target database you're copying to are using the same number, then that'll create a problem. But it's easy enough just to change the number by copying it within the editor. So there's ways around that. But you just got to make sure it'll flag you a warning. So that's a spotlight on dRofus dynamic GUI. I don't know if anyone has any questions or if that was just too much or not enough. Yes, hang on. Let me get a microphone to you. Hang on. Where was it?
Has dRofus been applied to different kinds of disciplines apart from health? Because I think I noticed BVN, like you used it for the fish market as well, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. dRofus can be applied to any typology. I was getting a bit OCD over the holidays and starting to organize my possessions in a dRofus database. I've heard of people using it to do an invite list, and they created people as items and then put them into different rooms.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But, you know, I think what you can hopefully see from the similarities across the GUI is that you can really get it to capture whatever you want.
Okay.
So yeah, also obviously defense projects love dRofus.
Okay. All right.
Anyone else? Is there any questions online? Just type them in if you do. Well, if not, we'll have some more questions at the end and I'll hand over to Chris Murray. Chris, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay with that one?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Some trouble.
So,
Any advice for the clicker?
Just
bear with it.
advice for the clicker, it's a mongrel. So
Okay.
just put your thumb into it.
Put my thumb into it. Point at that thing?
Yeah.
Or at the ceiling?
See what works.
Hello, everyone. And firstly, thank you, Adam, for inviting us along today. So yeah, my name is Chris Murray. I'm one of the customer success managers here at dRofus APAC, and we've got some new features to show you today. So as far as a release date, there was a nice line in the sand at 1st of December last year. So that was when we earmarked version 2.9 as a stable. And within that stable, there was close to maybe 40 new features or improvements. And then since that date, we've been rolling with our 2.10 beta, where a lot of the new stuff has been developed. And I think we're already up to version 2.10.4, I think now. 2.10.4, I'm sure. Okay, let's try this clicker. Okay, so this one has been quite popular. So this is in the stable. So lock Revit instance to a dRofus room. So what is this? So what it's doing is trying to ensure a particular instance in Revit gets validated in a particular room, even when that instance doesn't actually physically in the model reside in that space. So it can only be accessed via the dRofus panel within Revit. And there's a couple of use cases there, which are very health centric. But I've got a couple of videos because there's actually multiple methods of kind of using this tool. So let's have a go. Oh. I think we should go. So we have an ensuite. There's the items in room for an ensuite. And lo and behold, the light switch should actually belong to the ensuite, but it's outside the room. So this method requires you to actually temporarily move that light switch into the room. And what we're trying to do here is just make sure that we've got the occurrence IDs for the right occurrence in the instance in Revit. So now we've got them in there, we can then drag it, we can lock it, and then we can drag it out of the room. So one good point to make is also it won't see it in the room that resides in Revit either. So there is only one count. So there you can see it that it's validated as being in the space. And there is, have a click. And then, oh, there's another video. Method 2. So same scenario, but this time we're not going to temporarily move it. So instead, we're going to use the link occurrence and then going to go show all. So this is going to show me every single occurrence in dRofus of that elbow 015 light switch. I did my homework before, so I know which one it is. And then now the panel is active. We can then lock it, get rid of that one, and refresh the panel. And it's validated within the space. So there's probably multitude of different use cases for this. We listed a couple. Hopefully, give it a couple of months and have it, being used across the industry a lot. You guys will come up with hundreds. Okay, so this is in the beta only. So respect linked model families RCP, room calculation point, in a host space. So we're talking spaces. So previously this was only possible with rooms, but now it has been translated when a host is actually a space. So this is when we're having a linked model environment. So it does open the ability now to do kind of more federated validations. So do maybe large scale discrepancy reports, but it is more targeted towards like the HVAC and all the mechanical and services guys. Better management of shared parameter creation. So this is a good one. So the only place you're actually going to see this be used is actually within the attribute config. So where someone goes and defines your various, mappings, you have your key attribute. So what it actually does now is dRofus is actually hoovering up the GUID, and then it will ensure that anybody else who then goes to kind of create that using dRofus, it will allocate that same Revit shared parameter GUID. So just something else to add on this one, for existing projects and also maybe like your existing database templates, in order to capture that GUID, you do actually have to kind of unhook every link and also maybe your key attribute, just so then it's kind of sucked it up, because previously it didn't have the chance to actually kind of capture that GUID. Okay, so we have a bit of a section. So this is moving into the client and then documents. So documents is big business these days, as far as we're talking AIRs, and everyone's talking about lots of other warranty-based information that you can capture, asset information. So first of all, and it's probably the least interesting one, but we have a note field. Okay, no applause needed. So with the note field, one thing to note, and this is across all the modules, the note field is actually is editable by all users, even the ones that are read-only. Yeah, so it's often described as a bit of a dumping ground, and it was instigated very early on in kind of like dRofus web, so people could go and actually put something in there, but now it's across all modules. Logs. So you can see over in the screenshot on the right-hand side, you've got that piece of paper with the clock. So we see that in other modules too, but now we have it in documents. So this kind of leverages on with the next slide I'm going to show you. And together they form quite a powerful function. So you can see there is actually the very first column within that log is actually the revision. So you can also see who added, who deleted, and maybe go tell them off. So revisions. So now, again, on the right-hand side, you can see we've got another icon, just a piece of paper with the arrow. So now you can actually replace a document. So you can see the tools in the very top on the ribbon, we have replace. So if you use that, instead of just kind of deleting and adding, it then will basically create an extra version or revision. And the most clever part is you can actually download, say, we're up to revision 3 there. You can download revision 1 or revision 2. So classifications. Again, there's a lot of chatter about classifications and AIRs around these days. So for documents now, we have the ability to set a classification. This is got to be instigated from the admin settings within the client. So first of all, you create your classification, give it the tick box, and then on the right-hand side, you can see this example, you've got asset category and a multitude of use cases. New reports. So this is another 2.9 stable. And I believe this is actually a bit of a video I'll try and talk to. So it's been speeded up, so I've got to talk fast. So within the report contents here, you can actually see that there's a multitude of things you can either activate or deactivate, reorder if you so wish. Basically putting your own little stamp on your either room data sheet. We have these new reports for products as well, and items. So you can see here a load of information is getting removed. We're adding a field. So you can also add labels. So that kind of overwrites the default, and you can set that to be either before or after, or both. You can have before, after, and in front. There you go. So there's a couple of other options here. So room data is very similar to the inbuilt reports. So occurrences. So this is where you get a bit more options. So you can see there within that include attributes field, you actually can nominate a width. So by default, it comes up with percentages, but you can remove the percentage sign, and it's actually working on, I think it's points. So example, like an OSHFG code is around the 30, 35 point mark. And here it's being produced. So all the new reports with the square brackets new, they actually are being produced in a slightly different manner. So the screen that you see when you first generate is slightly different, but also, and that gets me to the next one. So there's a load of different options that we showed there. Text alignment, anything with the asterisks was basically specific to the occurrence table. Oh, yeah. Okay, so just digging down into a couple of those options there, and we've got some examples. So text alignment, you can see, does this have a pointer? I won't bother. So here you can see there's actually a direct alignment, center alignment here, and then the header groups, you can see asset, computer, peripheral, screens. So they're kind of like capturing multiple fields and giving them an overarching header. Maximum columns of 30. So this is again within that kind of tabular occurrence. Basically, you could go as wide as an A3 sheet, and currently in that example, I think there's only 13 or 16 fields shown. So yeah, 30. I doubt you'd need more. PDF batch print. So if you remember back to the old school out of the box reports, the only way to really get batch print to ever work was via the static choices. It's a little bit finicky. So now they basically, once you activate the PDF batch option in the drop down, you get the option to select any field within the database really via connections. But more importantly, you can activate select composite text. So that means basically via composite text, you can build a string. So maybe like room number plus room name, plus maybe a revision number that you've managed to capture in the database. And with it being PDF batch, you will then export it. You'll get a zip file, and it will contain, hopefully hundreds and hundreds of rooms and dedicated sheets. Okay, so the reports. There is what you can access via the UI. Then there is digging deep via dRofus web. So this is where you have to access it. So it's directly below where your username is. You open the reports, and then you get this thing, which is like, well, what is all this? Yeah. So this is the browser and preview. So in that browser column there, you've actually got all of the new style reports and any you may have saved from them. And then following that, you have this RDL editor button, which is highlighted down there at the bottom. It is also possible to generate directly from there. But just know, if you generate from here, there's no filters applied. It's just, so you might be waiting quite a while if you've got a big database. But once you go into RDL editor, and that stands for report definition language, if anyone's interested. Before I flick to the next slide, if you make any changes in here, and then you're getting errors when you're kind of generating the reports, then there is a button within the main application called API Web Reports, and basically it's just clearing the cache. It's because you've made changes, and it's the old things are still in the cache, so it just needs to refresh them. So maybe ask your admin if you can't access it. So once you open RDL editor, you basically get the access to manipulate via programming language, and I think it's either XML. And as you can see on the right hand side, yeah, in this example we've added color to certain blocks, we've increased text size, we've even changed the text color and the font. So yeah, we're hoping you guys are going to come with us, just with some amazing examples. So, but it might be reserved for some of the people who have, I don't know, existing programming language knowledge. So I said that there was close to 40 new updates in the stable 2.9. So on top of the ones that are included in the slides, here's another 10. Well, there was a 10. There was a 10, I promise. So I think my favorite there maybe is allow to split occurrences in derived item lists. Previously, it was only possible if your list was unique. Now with derived, obviously you can't do it with from template. And thank you very much. I think my colleague is going to maybe present something, maybe give people a moment to digest. Okay, thank you very much.
Is the lock button coming to the direct spines as well?
No, because it does rely upon the model actually knowing where that instance exists.
Yep.
dRofus doesn't technically know where it is if it's not in that room. So we asked the same question.
Can revisions be skipped in documents? So can you go from 1 to 3, or you have to upload a dummy?
Good question. There's always a workaround. You can delete ones. So if you add your dummy, then you will be able to delete it if you want to. Yeah.
No, cool. Thanks, everyone. For those in the room, I'll need to get you to look at the screen on your right, because that's where my presentation is going to be. Anyone who is dialing in from Teams, that should be what you're looking at right now. And the reason for doing that is I do have some, I'm hoping to get some audience feedback from what I'm presenting. So in 2022, we started a demonar series, which is sort of like a demonstration on the web. And the aim for that is to help our users learn more about the software. It's the content that we present, it's not necessarily just what you'll get in the training, but just more application of the software, how you'll use it in certain cases. So to date, we've done 6 of those up in the orange section there, and we've got 2 more before we finish off the first tranche of it. What I'm hoping to do today is to get some feedback around what the next topics can be. I do have a list here, but before I move on, for anyone who's interested to look at those that we've done, just jump onto our YouTube page, look at the playlist, and there's a playlist there for demonar on the bottom left. So with the next series of demonars, so we've got here are 10 topics which we've just sort of put together, and we're keen to hear from everyone on the call and in the space here of which one of these you are actually interested to listen and then find out more on. So the way I'm going to do this is to use an app called Slido. So if you want to take your phone out, and I'll just go through some instructions really quickly. So over the next few slides, the first slide that you'll come up is to obviously use the, sorry, not obviously, but to use the QR code and log in. And the first thing I'll ask you to do is to vote for the topic that interests you most. Vote as much or as little as you wish to. And the way to do that is to just drag that the topic and just drag it up to where it says select options from the list below. And if you want to suggest more topics, things that we haven't covered in here, use the Q&A tab at the top and just drop them in. And we'll go through the first one first, and then we'll do the Q&A a bit later. I'll show the results of that. So if you want to just take a moment here just to sign in. Everyone good? Yeah, a few nods over here. Yes. So this is the first one. Yes, it's only showing the top 7 at the moment, but as you drag, hopefully the ranking will start to appear. I can see that there are a few people doing rankings. Why is it not showing up? So when you've done your ranking, one thing I did miss out is you might need to scroll down to the bottom and just hit send. So you will register your, yes, that works. Into popular choices about child items. And then scheduling. Everyone had a go? So the next part then, which is really the last bit from me, is if you have any requests, Peter has put one in already, just drop them in. I'll leave the screen up there so you can see a list of topics that people are interested to find out more on. And yeah, that's the end. That's all from me. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I think if anyone's got any kind of other questions or just hang around. But that's probably it for the online stuff. We're just going to be here having a chat in person like we do now. Is there any questions from people online?
Yeah, Adam, I've got a question. I've got a question how you find in the log if something has been deleted out of a room, how do I find the item? Does that mean, did my question make sense? Sorry. If I'm looking for a particular item in a room, but it's been deleted from that room, can I find that when it was deleted? Can I find a log on that? Is what I'm trying to ask.
I would say absolutely. If you actually, what you're looking for is information in the room,
Yep.
the item list. So you're going to a room and you would probably filter that kind of in the log view. You'd want to filter it down to just show the FFE list or the service list or the particular list that you're interested in. And then there's a further filter below that that will give you the option to actually show the item deleted. You know, you can
Yep.
kind of target the information there and then search.
Yeah, sure, no worries.
Yeah.
That's right. I think I was looking in the room rather than in the item list, because sometimes I might have known there was an item, but not necessarily known the right code or the right exact naming. But I knew that there was let's say, for example, a bracket of some description that would be in this room, but now it's not there. So I was going from the room perspective, but I guess it's the item. Find the item first, right?
I can just add something to that. So there is the quick log. So if you were to go to the rooms module, pick the room that you think it's been missing from, activate the quick log, which was the same as the new kind of log that we showed with the documents improvement. From that, you get a somewhat holistic view of all the changes that have happened to that room, and you can use the conical kind of header filters. So to that, you can say added, or you can even just search on that item number. So I would say that's probably the fastest way through.
Yeah, no worries. That's great. And with all the new things that you've implemented, and is there, and this is probably a really off-topic question, it's very health related, I think, about existing items and things that maybe might not be necessarily, we can put them in a room that exists, but they don't need to be drawn into that room? Or is there a quick way for the architects to do something if, say, the client gives a spreadsheet, other than and create them directly into a room, but without giving everyone a headache, I guess? Adam, you know where I'm coming from with this too.
Yeah, we've been working on a few kind of strategies around this free. One of them is to actually kind of create a new category of item that might be modeled. And so you've got a to be modeled item and you've got a not to be modeled item. And these things are called might be modeled items. So a might be modeled item is able to be identified in a comparison report to show that although it's technically a discrepancy, it's one that can be ignored. And the way that we identify such items is that a totally never modeled item has no BIM ID and it doesn't have that lovely little box ticked about being to be modeled. So that's a never modeled item. And then an always modeled and verified item is the opposite of that. It's ticked to be modeled and it has a BIM ID. And so the might be modeled item has the BIM ID, however, it's not ticked to be modeled. And so within a comparison report, that allows you to show the to be modeled field. And if the item has a BIM ID, it's going to show up as a discrepancy, but can easily be filtered out and ignored as a acknowledged and kind of okay discrepancy. Apart from that,
is that comfortable? Is that a comfortable position for you guys, though? I guess thinking about how you manage the data and how you manage those discrepancies, is that just a simple, comfortable position that you guys would adopt? I guess from my perspective, where I sit and see things, those discrepancies don't come up for me. So you know, yeah, I guess it's about working together as partnership, like, you know, being the client and being the owner or the administrator of all of the work that happens behind the database.
Yeah, it's a strategy we've developed because we know that, like, especially on large projects, that you know, we move forward at a much faster pace than what FFE can really keep up. Or needs to keep up, because, you know, quite often a building's well into construction and drawings are issued for construction well before you can even order something, and things do change along the way. So it's something that, you know, you'd work together, you know, with an FFE consultant to decide, okay, what are the items that we can agree might be modeled because they don't have a significant spatial impact on the room. So, you know, if they're there or not, it doesn't really matter, because there still are some FFE items that you might want to create a discrepancy for, that, like, the architecture team, the clinical team might kind of disagree and say, oh no, well, we got to show that because it might not fit,
Yeah.
or it's got a service requirement. So by identifying those things early in a project and saying, look, these are all the things that, we can make might be modeled because they don't really matter. Then, we think that'll help with that process and give, consultants like yourself a greater freedom during the construction process to actually do what you need to do and get rid of the things that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. That's really good. I'm glad to see evolving in that space.
Yeah, there's only one thing I've thought about that doesn't exist in dRofus yet, but probably could. But just like there's the existing items, you can actually like take an item and you can put the existing quantity, and it gives you then your gross quantity is still correct, but the net quantity is reduced. But to also have a procurement kind of quantity or a not to be procured sort of quantity field that's really similar. So you could actually just go into the occurrence of the item and essentially mark it as like a 1 in the same way that like putting an existing item quantity against it works. So the item's still there, it still verifies, but from a procurement perspective, the procurement net quantity has been reduced.
They've decided they'll order less.
Yeah, it's like the deleting an item when you're not deleting an item.
Yeah.
But that doesn't exist yet. So.
I think the gross net does confuse some people when they're looking at that. So that would be a little plainer English, I guess, if you might say. But I mean that's I guess R&D if anyone chooses to take that on board. But a bit of feedback from a user's perspective.
Yeah, it's similar feedback I've heard from like other FFE consultants, right?
Yeah, and I think like when I've got like hospital staff assisting who have never seen a database, don't really understand Excel spreadsheets, all that type of stuff, it does get a little bit confusing for them, and just that type of thing. I think if you get down to the nitty-gritty user level, and that often an FFE consultant does have that assistance, and maybe they don't always aren't intricately involved in dRofus. It would probably really be dependent upon the size of the project, but in our experience, for example, like it's a lifesaver for me to have someone with view only to be able to go in and look at things, so I'm not the only person who knows exactly where things are in the database at any time.
Good question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Reed. Cheers. There's a hand up. It is from the participants. Who've got your hand up? Go ahead.
That's me. Yeah, it's Conrad here from STH Architects.
Hey, Conrad.
G'day. I'm in a car, so I didn't quite get to see the slides and stuff. But what piqued my interest was the, associate, an item outside the room to the room.
Oh yeah, that's fun.
Can that be done for an element in a linked model? So you got the main, so you've got an IPU or something like that. It's you've modeled it once. You've got instance of that link, say 4 times, but you go, you know what, that thing needs to be in that room. Can it work through linked models?
But I'd be happy to maybe answer that. And off the top of my head, I would say no, because dRofus is pushing a little bit of hidden data into the item to tell it what room it needs to be in. So
just parent ID.
It's a special little parameter that you must let dRofus create in your shared parameters. It's got to be, we had fun with it when we tried to.
I would just say it's a bit of a magical tool. And right now we haven't entirely tested it in the link model environment, but like Adam, what he says is basically there is a yes, no tick box that's actually what's performing the lock. So
you'd have to go into the linked model. You'd have to go into that model and tell it with dRofus what room it's in, and then go back to your other model, and then I think it would work.
Cool.
But just on that lovely little tool, because I've experienced tools like this before, is if you're not logged into dRofus, and someone just happily decides to copy that light switch around to every other light switch on a whole level, it'll think that light switch belongs to that other room. It'll copy that secret little link code that you can't even see or find or hope to. So
Right.
it's a great tool, but it comes like, I don't know, what does RuPaul say? It comes with great responsibility to like either make sure people who are copying things around are always logged into dRofus. Because if you're logged into dRofus, dRofus will automatically delete that link data. Just like, I don't know if you've noticed, if you copy a room and that room's linked to dRofus, if you're logged into dRofus, dRofus will automatically delete the link key
Yeah.
for you, whether you want to or not. It'll do the same with this feature. But if you've got users not logged into dRofus, they're copying light switches around, you're going to end up potentially, and you know what users are like, they've got a sixth sense for this thing. There'll be one linked light switch and they will find it and they will copy it everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't know how they know.
It's just a hypothetical at the moment, but yeah, no, that will be good. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, in the past, like we've actually tend to use a room calculation point for the light switch, but obviously that means sometimes creating multiple types to get.
Yeah.
But I have found generally with things like these light switches and call buttons and swipe access readers, if you've got a model that doesn't matter, like it's basically can be backwards or forwards, 'cause graphically it's the same. It's a placeholder from the front or the back. And if you pull the right size calculation point and you pull it off center so that you can, and put toggles in it so that you can mirror it without it deleting, you can usually 99.9% of the time I can get them to go to the right room. So by either rotating the item or flipping it, it'll put the calculation point into the room you usually want it to. But it doesn't always work because, you know, sometimes there's that swipe access and you want it to report to the particular room, but because of the design, it's actually way over on some other wall in a corridor, nowhere near it. And until Revit, how do you solve a problem like Revit? I don't know. Until you can like, wouldn't it be great if you could actually grab the calculation point and just move it? Like,
Yeah, on an instance basis.
like, that'd be
We
cool.
do have ArchiCAD 26 support.
Yeah. Well,
I'll keep note of that.
I'll let you try and explain to the mechanical engineer that he's going to use a program called ArchiCAD, because that's. But no, I hear you. Everyone knows that ArchiCAD's a better software for architects. It's just unfortunate that none of us get to use it. Hang on. No problem. No question? You can just shout it out if you like. Is there any more questions online? I've seen something pop up there. Let's say, Adam. Oh, great. Thanks. Not 4 minutes to me. Thanks a lot. But if anyone doesn't have any more questions, I think we'll call it. Thanks a lot for coming. Have another drink and enjoy.
Adam, just a quick clarification. Cicero used that quote in the 1st century BC, long before RuPaul. But just to clarify.
Great power comes great responsibility.
If we're doing
And,
clarification,
did he also say good luck and don't fuck it up?
if we're on to clarifications, the RDL editor language is actually JSON, not XML.